What happens when Hollywood's brightest stars cross the line from fame to felony? In this countdown, we're diving into 20 Hollywood actors who broke the law and landed behind bars, from shocking assaults to million-dollar scams, even murder. These aren't just scandals, they're stories of careers destroyed and lives changed forever. Some names will stun you. Others you'll never see the same way again. Stick around, because the truth gets darker with every entry. Danny Masterson, the actor, the allegations, the cult. In the early 2000s, Danny Masterson was a household name. As Stephen Hyde on that 70s show, he was the sarcastic rebel in bell-bottoms, the guy every fan wanted to hang with. But behind the scenes, the man with the dry wit was living a secret life that would destroy his career, his freedom, and his legacy. It began quietly. In the early 2000s, several women, some of whom were connected to the Church of Scientology, claimed that Masterson had drugged and raped them in his Hollywood Hills home. The accusations were disturbing, but what made the case even darker was the claim that the church had actively suppressed the victims' voices. According to their testimony, the church pressured them not to report the crimes, warning they could be excommunicated or cut off from family. One woman said she was told, "Don't call it rape. Handle it internally. You'll lose everyone you love." The case finally broke open in 2017. A long legal process followed, including a mistrial in the first attempt. But in 2023, justice came calling. Masterson was convicted of 2 counts of forcible rape and sentenced to 30 years to life in prison. His victims cried in court. So did his family. The sentence wasn't just about punishment. It was about finally being believed. He now sits in a California prison. A man who once starred on primetime TV, now stripped of fame and freedom. "You used your status to silence us," one survivor said in court. "Now it's your turn to be silent." And while Masterson's crimes were hidden behind Hollywood doors, our next story takes us into the mind of a young actor whose real-life tragedy was born not of power, but of deep, destructive pain. Ryan Grantham, from teen TV to a tragic crime. Ryan Grantham had the face of a teen idol. You may remember him as the shy kid from Diary of a Wimpy Kid, or the troubled teen from Riverdale. He was building a quiet but promising career in film and TV. But what happened in 2020 was so shocking, so heartbreaking, that it left Canada and the entire entertainment world speechless. On March 31st, 2020, Ryan shot his mother in the back of the head while she played piano in their British Columbia home. He didn't flee. He didn't cry. Instead, he recorded a video of her body, calmly confessing to the murder. What he planned next made the situation even darker. Grantham loaded his car with guns and ammunition and set off with a deadly mission. He intended to assassinate Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Along the way, he reconsidered. He even contemplated a mass shooting at his former university. But in the end, he turned himself in to the police. In court, it was revealed that Grantham had been suffering from severe depression, suicidal ideation, and cannabis-induced psychosis. 2 psychiatrists confirmed he had mental illness at the time of the crime. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 14 years. The courtroom was filled with grief. His sister called the act a complete betrayal. His own defense team said, "Ryan didn't just lose his mother, he lost himself." "I will never be able to undo what I did," Grantham told the judge, "but I want to try to make something of the life I have left." A heartbreaking case of illness and violence, But the next entry shows a very different fall from fame. One that started in a magical world and ended with firebombs, theft, and jail time. Jamie Waylett, Harry Potter's friend, turned rioter. Jamie Waylett once walked the hallowed halls of Hogwarts. As Vincent Crabbe in the Harry Potter films, he stood beside Draco Malfoy, smirking and sneering his way through 6 blockbuster movies. But after the cameras stopped rolling, Jamie's life spiraled into real-life chaos and a very real prison sentence. It started with drugs. In 2009, Jamie was stopped by police and found with cannabis in his car. That led to a search of his mother's house, where they discovered a small cannabis farm in the loft. He claimed it was for personal use. The courts gave him a warning and community service. But that was just the beginning. In 2011, London erupted in chaos during the infamous London riots. Streets were burning, shops were looted, and in the middle of it all was Jamie Waylett. CCTV footage showed him wielding a Molotov cocktail while robbing a pharmacy. When police raided his home again, they found 15 more cannabis plants. This time, there was no leniency. He was arrested, charged, and sentenced to 2 years in prison for violent disorder, possession of a firebomb, and looting. The boy who once fought wizards on screen was now locked behind bars, far from the world of spells and special effects. He had everything kids dream of, one former co-star said. But he lost his way in the real world. Since his release, Jamie has remained out of the spotlight. No public interviews, no apologies. Just silence, and the legacy of a career that ended in flames. And now, from childhood fantasy to Hollywood power, our next figure was once the most feared name in film. But when his secrets came to light, they ignited a revolution. Harvey Weinstein, the mogul behind bars. For decades, Harvey Weinstein wasn't just part of Hollywood. He was Hollywood. The co-founder of Miramax and the producer behind hits like Pulp Fiction, Shakespeare in Love, and The King's Speech, he was considered untouchable. The Oscars loved him. Celebrities thanked him. He controlled careers with a single phone call. But in 2017, the mask came off. First came the reports in the New York Times, then the dam burst. Over 90 women came forward with allegations of sexual harassment, assault, and rape, stretching back decades. Famous actresses, assistants, unknown interns. Their stories were eerily similar. Lured to meetings, cornered in hotel rooms, silenced by fear or NDAs. One survivor said, "It was like everyone knew, and no one said anything." Weinstein was charged in New York and later in Los Angeles. The trials were grueling. Some victims testified in detail. Others stayed anonymous. But the pattern was clear: power, abuse, denial. In 2020, he was convicted of rape and sexual assault and sentenced to 23 years in New York. In 2022, he received another 16 years in California. He's currently serving a combined 39-year sentence. His downfall was historic, not just because of who he was, but because of what he represented. The birth of the #MeToo movement, the end of silence, and a reminder that no one is above accountability. Harvey Weinstein's legacy won't be the films he made, one activist said. It will be the women who finally spoke out. And while Weinstein's power came from decades of dominance, our next actor used a very different tactic, one that was built on lies, fame, and a staged attack that fooled the world, at least for a little while. Jussie Smollett, a scripted scandal. Jussie Smollett had finally broken through. As Jamal Lyon on Empire, he was beloved for his vulnerability, his voice, and his presence as an openly gay black man in prime time. But in January 2019, his name made headlines for a very different reason. Smollett claimed he was attacked in the middle of a cold Chicago night. He said two masked men shouted racial and homophobic slurs, poured bleach on him, tied a noose around his neck, and yelled, "This is MAGA country!" The public rallied. Politicians tweeted support. Hollywood sent love. But within weeks, the story began to unravel. Chicago police discovered that the attackers were actually two brothers Smollett knew. One of them had even worked on Empire. They confessed that Smollett paid them to stage the attack to gain publicity and sympathy. The backlash was swift. He was arrested, charged with disorderly conduct, and accused of wasting law enforcement resources. He continued to deny everything, even after being convicted on 5 felony counts. Smollett was sentenced to 150 days in jail, community service, and ordered to pay over $100,000 in restitution. He served 6 days before being released, pending appeal. In 2024, the Illinois Supreme Court reversed the conviction, but the damage to his reputation was already done. He didn't just lie, one official said. He mocked real victims, and he did it for fame. And while Smollett staged a crime for attention, our next entry is no performance. It's the horrifying real-life act of a man who played a cop on TV, but became a killer in real life. Michael Jace, a cop on TV, a killer at home. Michael Jace was best known for playing conflicted cop Julian Lowe on The Shield. On screen, he wrestled with right and wrong. Off-screen, the lines blurred in a way no one saw coming. In May 2014, tragedy struck in Los Angeles. Jace shot his wife, April, in their home, twice in the legs and once in the back, while their 2 young sons watched. April was a devoted mother, a former track and field athlete, and by all accounts, the heart of the family. But Jace, overwhelmed by jealousy and insecurity, became convinced she was being unfaithful. "If you like running so much," he reportedly said as he pulled the trigger, "then run to heaven." The words chilled the courtroom. Friends and colleagues were stunned. Jace had always seemed calm, composed. But investigators revealed a history of financial troubles, emotional instability, and prior domestic issues. In his own testimony, he admitted to pulling the trigger but claimed he never intended to kill her. Intent didn't matter. A jury found him guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 40 years to life in prison. His sons, now growing up without both parents, became the silent victims of that horrific night. "He didn't just kill her," a family member said. "He destroyed a family, his own." And while Michael Jace's crime came from unchecked rage, the next criminal on our list hid behind luxury, laughter, and a camera crew until the truth came crashing down. Jen Shah, real housewife, real fraud. Jen Shah lived large on the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. Lavish parties, designer clothes, private assistants. Her over-the-top lifestyle became part of the show's appeal. But what viewers didn't know was that much of it was funded through a scheme that preyed on the vulnerable. Behind the scenes, Shah was running a national telemarketing fraud operation. Alongside her assistant and a group of co-conspirators, she targeted elderly victims with false promises of business opportunities and services. Victims were told they could build online empires with Shah's help. Instead, they were scammed out of thousands, even tens of thousands. Court records showed that Shah not only participated in the scheme, but mocked her victims in private texts. One victim, a 75-year-old retiree, lost over $40,000 chasing a dream that didn't exist. Another, a 92-year-old World War II veteran, died by suicide after losing his savings. Prosecutors painted Shah as a manipulator who knew exactly what she was doing. In 2022, she finally pleaded guilty to wire fraud and was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. Her fall from grace was swift, public, and brutal. She sold the world a version of herself, a former castmate said, but the real Jen was built on lies. But if Jen Shah built her empire on fraud, our next figure built his career on fresh starts until his past caught up with him in the darkest possible way. Jared Fogle, Subway's dark secret. Jared Fogle was the poster boy for transformation. He wasn't an actor in the traditional sense, but he was one of the most recognizable faces in America, thanks to Subway. His story of losing over 200 pounds by eating sandwiches made him a media darling. But beneath that wholesome image was a life so disturbing, it stunned the country. In 2015, everything unraveled. Federal agents raided Fogle's Indiana home. Investigators uncovered that Fogle had been soliciting underage girls for sex and was in possession of disturbing child sexual abuse material. He had exchanged messages with sex workers, asking them to find minors for him. He had traveled across state lines to engage in sexual acts with children. It turned out the head of Fogle's charity, meant to combat childhood obesity, was also involved in distributing explicit content. The FBI connected the dots, and soon the Subway spokesperson was exposed as a predator hiding in plain sight. Fogle pleaded guilty to 2 federal charges: distribution of child pornography and traveling to engage in illicit sexual conduct with a minor. He was sentenced to more than 15 years in prison. The betrayal was immense. A man once trusted by millions of families had exploited the very people he claimed to help. He was supposed to be a role model, one parent said. Instead, he was a nightmare. And while Fogle's crimes were monstrous, the next chapter in our list belongs to a TV power couple whose obsession with image and money led them straight into federal court. Todd and Julie Chrisley, glamour funded by fraud. Todd and Julie Chrisley built a reality TV empire with Chrisley Knows Best. Viewers tuned in for the Southern charm, the banter, the wealth. But the real story was far less polished. For years, the Chrisleys had been lying to banks, defrauding lenders and evading taxes to keep their fantasy alive. According to prosecutors, they used fake bank statements and doctored documents to secure over $30 million in loans. They hid income from the IRS, and they used the money not on businesses, but on designer clothes, luxury cars, and extravagant real estate. When it caught up with them, they didn't back down. They doubled down, denying everything in court. But the jury didn't buy it. In 2022, both Todd and Julie were convicted. Todd received 12 years in prison. Julie got 7. The couple surrendered to federal prison in early 2023. Their once glossy TV life was over. They lived like royalty, said one federal agent, but it was all smoke and mirrors. From reality TV unto real consequences. But the next story shows how even positive fame, cheering, celebration, inspiration, can be tainted when trust is broken at the deepest level. Jerry Harris. From Netflix, cheerleader to federal inmate. Jerry Harris was supposed to be a beacon of joy. As the breakout star of Netflix's Cheer, he inspired millions with his infectious energy, resilience, and kindness. He was featured on talk shows, interviewed by Ellen, and even appeared at the Oscars. But beneath the glitter and confetti was a darker reality no one saw coming. In 2020, twin teenage boys came forward, accusing Harris of soliciting explicit images and messages from them. They weren't alone. Investigators found that Harris had exchanged sexually explicit content with at least 10 minors and had engaged in sexual activity with underage boys. One of the victims was just 15 at the time. Harris cooperated with authorities. He pleaded guilty to charges of child exploitation and traveling across state lines for sexual activity with a minor. In 2022, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison, followed by 8 years of supervised release. The fall was devastating. Fans were heartbroken. The trust he'd built, especially with young viewers, was shattered. "We believed in him," one viewer said, "and he used that belief to do terrible things." Up next, a football legend whose name once echoed in stadiums, but whose hidden crimes turned him from a hero into a predator. Darren Sharper, the predator behind the pads. Darren Sharper was once a football icon, a 5-time Pro Bowler, Super Bowl champion, and future Hall of Fame hopeful. He had the charisma, the accolades, the fame. But behind the locker room applause and bright stadium lights, Sharper was harboring a sickening secret. He was a serial predator. Between 2011 and 2014, women in multiple states accused Sharper of drugging and raping them. The stories were nearly identical. He'd meet women at bars or parties, offer them drinks laced with powerful sedatives, and then sexually assault them once they were unconscious. Investigations revealed a chilling pattern, coordinated, calculated, and repeated across 4 states. In 2016, he pleaded guilty or no contest to charges in California, Arizona, Nevada, and Louisiana. Prosecutors stated that Sharper had assaulted as many as 16 women. It was a level of depravity no one saw coming from someone once considered a role model on and off the field. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison, far below what many believed he deserved. He wasn't just an athlete, one survivor said. He was a predator with a game plan. From the gridiron to glam rock, our next figure lived in the spotlight for decades, but his crimes reached far deeper than his lyrics ever hinted at. Gary Glitter, pop star with a predator's past. In the 1970s, Gary Glitter ruled the stage. With his signature silver jumpsuits and stadium-rocking anthem Rock and Roll Part 2, he became a glam rock icon. But his fame, his music, and his public image would all be eclipsed by one of the most appalling criminal legacies in music history. Glitter's fall began in 1999 when he was convicted of possessing child pornography. That conviction was just the tip of the iceberg. In 2006, he was deported from Vietnam after serving time for sexually abusing 2 underage girls. And in 2015, British authorities charged him with historic child sex offenses dating back to the 1970s and 80s. He was found guilty of abusing 3 young girls, ages 8 to 13. Glitter was sentenced to 16 years in prison. His music was pulled from movies, TV, and sports arenas. No more applause. No more radio plays. His legacy wasn't just canceled, it was condemned. In 2023, he was briefly released on parole, but rearrested for breaching his release terms. The message was clear. The world wasn't ready to forgive, and never would be. He took innocence, one survivor said, and wore fame as his shield. But where Glitter's crimes spanned decades, our next story unfolded like a high-stakes political thriller, starring a little-known actress, a deadly substance, and a plan right out of a TV drama. Shannon Richardson, From TV extra to bioterrorist, Shannon Richardson had small roles in big shows, The Walking Dead, The Vampire Diaries. But in 2013, she stepped into a real-life role that stunned America: domestic terrorist. That year, she mailed letters laced with ricin, a deadly poison, to President Barack Obama, New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, and a gun control advocate. Each letter included threatening messages, warning recipients to stay out of my business. The public panicked. Homeland Security scrambled. A full-scale investigation began. Initially, Richardson claimed her husband had framed her, but forensic evidence and her own digital footprint told a different story. She had researched how to make ricin online. She'd ordered the materials. She'd written the letters. It was a calculated act, triggered by a bitter divorce. She had tried to destroy her ex-husband's life and nearly risked others in the process. The courts saw through it. In 2014, Shannon Richardson was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. Her mugshot replaced her headshots. Her IMDb page frozen in time. She didn't just send poison, a federal agent said. She poisoned trust and exploited fear. But our next entry isn't about a plot. It's about a violent outburst, a woman barely escaping with her life, and a man who once lived for the spotlight. War Machine, a fighter's violent implosion. John Copenhaver, better known by his MMA alias War Machine, lived up to his name in the worst possible way. A rising star in mixed martial arts, he had the look, the record, and a reality TV stint on The Ultimate Fighter. But in 2014, his aggression spilled beyond the ring and into terrifying violence. That year, War Machine broke into the Las Vegas home of his ex-girlfriend, adult film actress Christy Mack. Inside, he found her with another man. What followed was a nightmare. War Machine assaulted them both. Christy was beaten, kicked, punched, and nearly killed. She suffered 18 broken bones, a ruptured liver, and a fractured eye socket. Prosecutors said it wasn't just a moment of rage, it was attempted murder. In 2017, War Machine was convicted on 29 felony counts, including kidnapping, coercion, and sexual assault. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 2053. Christy Mack survived, but the scars, both physical and emotional, remain. "I thought I was going to die," she told the court. "I begged him to kill me, so it would be over." And now to the final name on our list, a global superstar who used his fame not for good, but to lure and exploit, leaving a legacy not of music, but of trauma. Kris Wu, global star, global shame. Kris Wu was once untouchable. A former member of K-pop group EXO, he had crossed into global fame, starring in Chinese blockbusters, gracing fashion runways, and collaborating with international music icons. He was China's golden boy, until everything unraveled. In 2021, a 17-year-old woman came forward, claiming Wu had lured her to his home under the pretense of a music video audition, then sexually assaulted her after intoxicating her with alcohol. She wasn't alone. Soon, more women, many minors, stepped forward with eerily similar stories. Authorities investigated. The case became one of the most high-profile celebrity scandals in Chinese history. In November 2022, Kris Wu was convicted of rape and other sexual offenses. He was sentenced to 13 years in prison and ordered to be deported after serving his time. China erased his presence. His music disappeared from streaming services. Brands dropped him overnight. He went from idol to inmate in a matter of months. "He used his fame to prey on girls," said one survivor. "Now he'll have to face what he did, in silence." Fame can dazzle. It can protect. But as we've seen, it can also hide darkness. These 15 stories aren't just about crime. They're about the fall from grace and the reality that justice doesn't care how famous you are. Thanks for watching. These stories prove that even fame can't protect you from justice. If you found this video eye-opening, hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives, and let us know in the comments which story shocked you most. See you in the next one.